Nurse Redheart, Big McIntosh, A True Love by Swished Apple. Like every morning at Sweet Apple Acres, Big McIntosh was often up early to do his chores, but this time he had to do his chores mostly alone, since Applejack was away in Appaloosa to help some relatives and Applebloom were at the school, so he had to take care of most of the chores by himself. And of course, Big Mac didn't mind to take care of his chores and his sisters. But sometimes he couldn't do it all himself. He get overly worked out. Even his grandmother, Granny Smith, had told Big Mac not to take it too much of his work. Just take it easy. But for the most part, Big Mac doesn't even care or he doesn't mind as to take care of his chores and his sisters because he know they always appreciate his help. But this time he pushed his limit too much. He was already had been taking care of feeding the animals and helping baking with Granny Smith in the morning, but this time he is going to transport two full wagons with apples to the market. But this time he had another cart, 3 wagons with apples. Granny Smith told her grandson not to take so many wagons of apples. That was too much for him. He could not handle it. A Big Mac always ensured that he could handle 3 wagons of apples, since he can take care of 2 wagons. So 3 wagons would not be much a problem for him. But what he didn't know, that was too much, even for him. When he just arrived to the market, he was about to unload some of the car wagons at the market, but then he collapsed. A lot of ponies suddenly gathered around him and wondered what was wrong. It turns out, during his travel from the farm to the market, he had pushed his limit too much. He had strained his back too much, and he had a serious level of pain. But he tried and tried to restrain this pain as much as possible. But when he came to the market, he then was the first time during this travel to relax for a single moment, and it was then the pain got even more. The intense pain came like a hit on his back, and that made him lose his conscience. Next time he woke up, he was in the hospital. Unfortunately, Granny Smith was there and Abigail. Both of them was very happy to see that he was okay, but he asked what happened, and Granny Smith told him what has happened. He pushed him too far by carrying 3 wagons of apples to the market. She told him over and over with an angry tone not to do that. He should have listened to her, since she would know about this. But he thought that he could handle 3 wagons of apples. But then he apologized to his grandmother about this stupid thing, and that he promised never to do it again. But then suddenly, Nurse Redheart appeared in the room and told Granny Smith and Applebloom to leave. Big Mac needed his rest, and since he had a very serious back pain, it would need a lot of rest. And according to her, Big Mac was not allowed to leave the hospital for next 2 weeks because of this serious injury. And Big Mac was was very shocked. 2 whole weeks in the hospital, but who was to take care of the farm? Apple Bloom couldn't even move at least one of the wagons by himself. And Applejack was in Appaloosa for next couple of weeks, so she could have just came back. Even if Big Mac had told Granny Smith not to tell Applejack about it, but she couldn't keep that a secret. Even if she came back to Ponyville and found out from her friends that Big Mac had recently been in the hospital for 2 weeks because of his injury, she will even scold him about this. So he realized she had a point. So she told her to tell his sister, but at least telling her not to come home, to stay there, and they would solve this problem somehow. And it turns out her friends was willing to stand up to help Big Mac at the farm while he was in hospital. Apple Bloom had her help from her friends, and the farm always went well. But for the next 2 weeks that Big Mac was in hospital, he was bored. He was only allowed to stay in bed, not to even to move or walk around, because he needed his rest, and because doing that, he needed at least 1 or 2 surgeries because of his back injury. And he didn't thought that was that serious, but Nurse Redheart had explained to Big Mac this kind of injury, if he didn't had those surgeries and he started walking around and perhaps moving around 2 wagons again, it would be much serious. It could even lead him to die from this serious injuries. And now he took it very seriously. But he asked Nurse Redheart not to tell his family about that part. It would freak them out. And she had promised not to tell his family, at least for now. But if this got even more worse, his condition, she had the this obligation to tell his family if it got even more seriously. And he realized it. But even for the next 2 weeks when he's in the hospital, Apple Bloom sometimes came over for visit with her friends, and they told him what's happening in school over time, that everything is going well, and that they are helping Twilight at the school, and that she and her friends are helping at the farm. And Big Mac is proud to hearing that his sister is seriously taking care of the farm, even she's still so young. She managed to take care of the family business so easily well. But he even missed to help at the farm. But for most of that, Big Mac had actually over time when he was in the hospital slowly get to know Nurse Redheart even better. It happens that sometimes she came to his room and they had a chat. They were talking to each other for maybe sometimes for a few minutes to almost an hour. And for almost at that time they spent together, Big Mac had actually fallen in love with Nurse Redheart. But what he didn't know, Nurse Redheart is actually fallen in love with him. But she couldn't even tell him that, because she didn't know how he would react, if he had the same feelings same for her back, or that he only liked her as a friend, or just that. So she didn't tell him. But over time, when he was still in the hospital, when she visited him, she often read the newspaper for him, or just telling him what just happened around in town, and he misses to be around her. But when the 2 weeks had passed, he was allowed to go home. But Nurse Redheart told Big Mac not serious working for the next 2 weeks more. And he was surprised, so he was like, another 2 weeks of nothing working? But she told him that he can still help at the farm, but not much emphasis, carrying wagons or even any apple bucking for next 2 weeks. So the only thing he could do was only feeding the animals or helping in the kitchen. For rather than that, nothing else. And she had also informed his family to make sure he doesn't do any big work around the farm. And even that Big Mac tried in secret, tried to do some heavy working, he had always his sisters or his grandmother nearby, so he couldn't do any particular hard work around. So he felt sort of almost in depression. He spent almost like most of the days in his room, resting, or reading some books by himself. But after another 2 weeks had passed, he was now fully recovered and was allowed to do his normal work. But Nurse Redheart and Dr. Howards had also told him, just remember not to do too much. If he had reached his limit, then don't push it even more, because it could have been end up in the same condition as his before, or even worse. And he promised. And he actually did promise that. But for the next couple of days after that he would fully recover from his injuries, Big Mac had actually been thinking about maybe asking Nurse Redheart out. But at first he didn't know exactly if he should do it, but he asked the Applejack for an advice. And she was not much as a surprise at hearing that Big Mac wanted to ask Nurse Redheart out on a date. She almost had some feeling that he was actually had a romantic feelings for Nurse Redheart. So Applejack told Big Mac just to be himself. Be calm. Just be calm and himself. So Big Mac went to the hospital, and that was only the time after that Nurse Redheart actually had just ended her shift at work. She just had left the hospital when she encountered Big Mac, and she asked if he was there for any upfront treatment or something, and he said nope, and he would have to ask her out. She was merely surprised to hearing that he was asking her out, and rather that, and he then told her that he actually had a crush on her, that he was interested in her. That took her as a surprise, but she said yes. And they actually went out the same day. Big Mac took Nurse Redheart to the local restaurant, in which they had a very great time. They talked a lot about the things that has happened for the past few weeks, and that just had a great time. And the next date they went to the movies, seeing a romantic movie. It was just the perfect date for them both. Even Big Mac's sisters and grandmother was curious to hearing more about this date. If it's going well, or if something else going on. Since Big Mac didn't mention much about his date with Nurse Redheart, and they were afraid that Nurse Redheart had stopped seeing him and seeing some other pony. But it turns out he did just wanted to talk much about his dates. They didn't do much, just having a great time, talking, just enjoying each other's company. As long as he's happy, they are happy. But then the day came during the winter. There was a big flu pandemic going on in town. Many ponies were suffering from very high fever, but luckily Big Mac didn't have any of the flu. But Nurse Redheart was overwhelmed of so many ponies in the hospital and had to do so many house calls because of this flu epidemic. The staff of the hospital was understaffed and they had not enough staff in ponies and staff to take care of all the ponies. So Big Mac had asked Nurse Redheart if he could help her at some point, somehow. But she was still at first skeptical of how he can help her. But he told her that he actually had some medical training when he was younger by his parents. Since after that he was to look after his siblings when they were younger. So she did ask him some medical questions how to take care of the flu pandemic, and he answered all correct. So they decided to be like a team. Since most of the staff of the hospital take care of the patient there, Nurse Redheart and Big Mac went to the patients around the town to help them. Big Mac carried all the things that she needed, which she didn't mind, and they actually helped a lot of ponies around town. But for most part from that, their relationship only got stronger every day during that time. Big Mac could never be more happier to help her great during this pandemic on the flu. Even during the flu time, his sisters had the flu as well, but not so serious. But Nurse Redheart and Big Mac gave them some medicine they needed, and a few weeks later, all the flu pandemics was over. There were still some cases, but not as many as before. Nurse Redheart was happy for Big Mac's help and promised him that was the best help she had. If he hadn't even helped her, she probably had to take care of all of the ponies for the next couple of weeks even also. So she gave him a kiss as a thanks, and that made him faint of love. Then during the spring around Hearts and Hooves Day, Big Mac had actually planned something special for Nurse Redheart. During his time in Appaloosa only a few weeks earlier, he was there to help his cousin Brainburn, and then he bought a ring. A proposal ring. He was going to ask Nurse Redheart to marry him. And during the date on Hearts and Hooves Day, he actually asked her. And she didn't need a moment to think for, for an answer. She said actually yes right away. But for most of that, when they told his family, they were so overwhelmed of thrill of excitement. Applebloom was so excited she couldn't even stop jumping up and down like Pinky do. And the wedding was actually held only a few weeks later at Sweet Apple Acres. And this wedding was probably one of the biggest within the Apple family in a long time. Big Mac had hoped, wished his parents could be there to see this day happening. But he knew they'd always be there with him, no matter what happens. Nurse Redheart was actually happy to be part of the Big Apple family, and later they actually went to Crystal Empire for their 2 weeks of honeymoon. And barely 2 years later, Big Mac and Nurse Redheart announced to his family that they want to be parents within a few months and they actually was expecting twin daughters. And a few months later, they actually had the twin daughters, and both Big Mac and Nurse Redheart was so proud to have their own family. And after that, the twins were about 5 years old, they had a son. And that's how Big Mac, Nurse Redheart, for their true love, got a family. The end.